Hey guys, Lois here, and in this video I want to do an Assimil review and talk about my own experience of going through Assimil Japanese and Assimil Italian. And so specifically I'm going to talk about the results that you can expect, the results that I got after finishing the entire methods for Italian and Japanese. And I want to talk also about the big issues with Assimil. There are mainly two issues that I encountered. So as I said, I used Assimil for Italian and for Japanese. These were like the very first things that I did when I started. When I started learning Italian, I took the digital version of Assimil Italian. And for Italian, I did the first digital version, and then there is the more advanced one that you do after the first one. So in total, it's 200 lessons. So you have the first version of the digital version, which is for total beginners. It goes up to about an intermediate level, and then the second volume of this digital version of Assimil goes from intermediate to about upper intermediate, I would say, or even advanced. For Japanese, same thing. When I started learning Japanese, the first thing that I did was I took the Assimil, the digital version of the Japanese course. So going from beginner, and this time I wouldn't say it goes up to intermediate, it's more like lower intermediate. The reason why I went with Assimil was simply because I got it from my grandmother. I mean, not the digital versions, but my grandmother recommended that I go through Assimil just because she used Assimil to learn Spanish and Italian, being a German speaker. So my grandmother is a German speaker. For me, being a French speaker, obviously Assimil Italian got me pretty good results, whereas Assimil Japanese, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, it was much more difficult. In terms of levels that you can expect to get at the end, so for me being a French speaker, obviously Assimil Italian was highly beneficial, and I got to a level where, so I went through the first 100 lessons, which is the basic course, and then you have the 100 lessons after this, which is like more advanced. And at the end of this, I think it took me about 10 months, and I got to a level where I could have fluent conversations with Italian speakers. I'm going to add a caveat here because this is not the only thing that I did. In terms of studying, it was the only thing that I did, but very often, keep in mind I was in college at this time, and I was hanging around always Italian-speaking people because I was studying in Switzerland. In Switzerland, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, there are plenty of Italian speakers. So I made it a point to hang out with them. I made friends with them, and it turns out that a lot of Italian speakers in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, they're not too keen on speaking French. So this was really an ideal situation, so I would not necessarily attribute all of my progress to Assimil Italian, although it was a pretty big contributor. So this is about 10 months approximately, and I could have fluent conversations. Not like a super advanced level, but very good conversations. With Japanese, this was an entire, just like a different ball game, essentially. I first started with Italian, and then I went on to Japanese, I think maybe 1 or 2 years after. And I did Assimil Japanese, completed the entire method, and I think back then there was no advanced Japanese course, so there was just like the basic Japanese course going from total beginner to about lower intermediate, 100 lessons. It took me more time to go through Assimil Japanese because it's harder, but at the end I definitely could not have fluent conversations. I could not have conversations at all. And what I did was, well, obviously, being in Switzerland, there was no Japanese speakers, so to speak, that I knew at least. So I went on italki and I found language partners. I'm going to put a link to italki in the description of this video where you can find, teachers and language partners. But I did this, and I talked to language partners, I would say about 3 times a week approximately. So it was about 3 times, 3 hours of conversations in Japanese, aside from Assimil Japanese. At the end of the Assimil method, I definitely could not have proper conversations, which was somewhat, disturbing. It was a little bit disappointing for me because I put more effort into Japanese than I did into Italian, and I did not have results that were nearly as good as with Italian. With, now looking back, obviously, I mean, as a French speaker, obviously Italian is much, much, much closer to French than Japanese. And even if you're an English speaker, learning Italian is going to be super easy. I mean, this is one of the easiest languages for an English speaker. So just to give you an idea of sort of what you get with Assimil, I know a lot of people like to get the books. I got the digital versions, as I said. These are equivalent to the books, but if you get the book version, you get a book which I believe are quite big, about 800 pages or so. There used to be audio CDs, but now I think they're gonna give you like audio. It's either like a USB type of thing or digital audio. I'm not really sure. I got the digital version, so it's a course online. You download an application, you install it on your computer or your phone, and it's pretty much the same thing. The only advantage I think with the digital version is that you have a pronunciation recorder, which allows you to train your pronunciation. But overall, the way it's organized is pretty much the same. In the book or the digital version, you get about 100 lessons, and each lesson actually is a story. So when you start from the very first lesson, whether it be Japanese or Italian, it's a very short story, or I should say a dialogue. It's a dialogue, and obviously the first dialogue is going to be super easy, super basic. And as you go through the method, it gets harder and harder. And so each story, there are 100 stories, 100 dialogues. You're going to have, it's dual language. So in the books, I know that you have on one side of, on one page, you have like the Japanese version or the Italian version. And then on the other page, you have the English translation, line by line. And so very often the stories, the dialogues are set in the country of the language. So for example, for Assimil, Japanese, and very often there were, Japanese references. So it's like a dialogue between two Japanese speakers, which is kind of nice. You do get some cultural notes. Overall, the method is very much, you start the book or the digital version. There is a little bit of theory in terms of the grammar, the pronunciation, and stuff like that. But you jump straight into the dialogues, and it's sort of reversed compared to what you would do in school, which is, in school, you're really taught the grammar, and then you go ahead and read stuff or apply it with exercises. With Assimil, it's a little bit reversed in the sense that you read the dialogues first, and as you read the dialogues, you will get an asterisk telling you, hey, the way the guy said it at this point is reference to, it uses this grammar rule and so on. So you read the story first, you read the dialogue, and then as you go, you learn the grammar and the vocabulary and some cultural notes as well. I think this way of going about it is pretty good. It's much more entertaining than doing the theory first and then reading stuff. There are also activities for each story. So the activities are stuff like translation, fill in the blanks, and stuff like that. Pretty light stuff. You don't necessarily need to do them. The core of Assimil is really the lessons. All right, so now let me talk about the two big issues that I had with Assimil. So the first issue is that I could not remember the vocabulary that I learned in Assimil. The second issue is that I think Assimil is pretty good, but it's not comprehensive enough to get you up to a good level. That's it. In terms of vocabulary, so you're going to be exposed to a lot of vocabulary in the 100 dialogues, obviously, but I found multiple times that, I would have conversations with people in Italian or in Japanese. And a lot of times there are things that I either heard or that I was trying to say, and I knew for a fact that these words or these expressions were in the lessons, but I could not remember them. And this happened so many times. There were, and I'm not talking about rare words, or I'm talking about pretty common stuff. I could not remember them. My solution here is that I started using Anki, specifically when I started learning Japanese. So Anki is it's a free app for learning vocabulary. It's a smart flashcard application. It makes sure that you remember things in the long term. So there is a scheduling algorithm. I'm not going to get into details, but I'm going to put a link to Anki in the description of this video. I've also made videos on Anki, which I'm going to link to in the description as well. Next, the biggest problem to me was also, the second biggest problem was that Assimil was not comprehensive enough. So you have 100 dialogues, which may seem like a lot, and usually my goal was to do 1 dialogue a day. But I still found that at the end of the 100 lessons, specifically for Japanese, it was just not enough at the end of the day. Like in terms of grammar, in terms of vocabulary, the lessons are not comprehensive enough. And so the way I actually made up for this was I used a company called Innovative Language. So there are plenty of websites. I don't know if you're aware of, like, for Japanese, for example, it's Japanese Pod 101. There's French Class 101, Italian Pod 101. So the 101 websites. I'm going to put links to all of these websites in the description. These are essentially Assimil, but much more comprehensive. You know, the 101 websites from the Innovative Language Company, very, very similar to Assimil, but there are multiple advantages. So the lessons are more comprehensive, first of all. The product is also cheaper than Assimil in general, depending on the duration that you get for your subscription. There are more lessons. So Assimil, for example, for Japanese, it's going to cover, it's 100 dialogues. With Japanese Pod 101, there are hundreds of dialogues, if not thousands. You get a complete transcript of the lesson, just like with Assimil, but it's more detailed. There's more grammar, there's more vocabulary, there's just more of everything. You also get the pronunciation feature depending on the plan that you get with Innovative Language. And just overall, it just feels a little bit more modern, I would say, because Assimil, has been around for decades. And even the digital version, I remember thinking that it just didn't feel very modern, which is not really a problem, but I just think that Innovative Language is a better alternative. So, something to consider here. I'll put all the links in the description. But I think overall the biggest issue for me was really the vocabulary. So I would highly encourage you to start using Anki. And also I made a bunch of my own flashcards with thousands of words that you can use with Anki. I'll put a link to this in the description as well. It's Anki Core Decks. So that's it for this Assimil review. I hope that you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video.